Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc. Dr. Steve Wood. With me today is Dr. Bill Kanasky. Bill, how's it going there in Florida?
It's absolutely beautiful. You've heard the phrase, like, I'm on cloud 9. You've heard that? Mm-hmm. I'm on cloud 10. I'm on cloud 10.
That must be good then. So that's good. I'm glad.
It's February. It's 79 degrees. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. I'm outside. I mean, what more can you? And know what I had? Know what we made this week? Chili with bison meat. You ever have bison meat?
I have not. No.
Super expensive, but man, very lean, very, very tasty. You may want to throw that out there next time you're making your chili. I go bison meat all the way, and you can make bison burgers. It's a big thing.
Now here's the key thing. Now, are you a beans or no beans chili guy?
Okay, I am a no bean. See, my wife's beans. I'm no beans, and so we have negotiated a proportion of beans that she likes and that I can tolerate. But I'm a no beans guy. Load it up with meat, load up with onions. I am an onions and cheese guy, though.
That's always good. But the beans whole thing here in Texas, the whole chili with beans and no beans is definitely a point of contention that you don't bring up at parties unless you really want to start
that and barbecuing. Boy.
Yeah.
You could start a barroom brawl over that topic.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I got you today. We teed up on a prior episode that we were going to talk about alternative causation. We talked about our bad baby case episode. Wanted to talk more about alternative causation and how important it is. But I have a feeling though, before we start, I'm sure you got a rant up your sleeve. I'm sure there's something you're itching to get out for today.
Well, and you were part of this experience. We're going to call this the customer service rant.
Yeah. Okay. I know.
So after our focus group and after a decent long drive, we're exhausted. And the only thing we want to do is have some sushi. Big sushi guy, just like you are. So my wife and my son, meet you and I at the sushi restaurant here locally by my house. And our server, she was first off, she was very nice.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. She was very, very nice. It was a very friendly greeting, right? And she brought us some waters, and she said, so she's batting 1,000 so far, right? Okay, so then she is right on track. She says, "May I get your drink orders?" And my wife orders a sangria, and you and I are looking, and we looked up, and she walked away. She just abandoned you and I. And you and I are looking at each other like, what the hell is going on here? So then, which, by the way, this place, like, you're not going to get hammered in this place. Everything takes too long. So finally, after 7 minutes, she comes back with this sangria, and I'm looking at her like, what am I on the pay no mind list, right? Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have. And so then we get our drinks. Okay, so strike one. So then, we put in our orders and told her that we needed to split the check. This is going to get told in about a minute and a half. We both get miso soup. I love miso soup. Okay, this place did you like that miso soup? It was phenomenal.
It was good. Yeah,
really, really good. So I'm sitting on the far end. You're closest to her. She goes to hand me my miso soup and spills a good third of it all over your cell phone.
Yeah, I'm still smelling miso when I take phone calls now.
Like, so when you're like this, you can still smell the miso soup.
Yeah, it reminds me of the dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, and so now, granted, I kind of laughed it off. You wiped off your phone, whatever. And so, get her miso soup. Brings out the food. I thought the food was great. You didn't like that one roll, did you?
I liked them all. Yeah, no, I liked it.
Well, I thought one underwhelmed.
The Mexican roll was a little strange.
Yeah,
but
I don't like anything Japanese and Mexican is really not a good mix. And
it sounded good in theory.
Yeah, so I don't know kind of where your brain was for that. So then the check. So we tell her how we want to split the check because technically you and I are still working, right? And she completely screws up the check. Right now, at this point, how long have we been there? Like we want to go home, have a couple beers and watch college basketball, and it's just taking forever, taking forever, taking forever. So she finally, like I'm dying, like I want to go to sleep. She finally gets this, finally gets the check right. And as I go to hand her my Amex card, she drops it in she drops it in a bowl that had what I think my son Dean had like orange chicken or something,
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
the sauce was in the bottom because he took the rest home. She drops my Amex in the bowl and it just sinks to the bottom. So now, okay, so my Amex smells like orange chicken. Your phone smells like miso.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: I tipped her well. I couldn't get. She was too nice.
Yeah, she was definitely, it was probably one of those, she was newer and she was just having a bad day. It would have been different if she wouldn't have had such a good attitude, but she was just generally a pleasant person.
Yeah. So I guess that wasn't much of a rant. I think it's kind of a funny story, but
Well,
yikes.
let's not forget you left your doggy bag and she had to run it
No,
out to
I
you
did
too.
not leave my doggy bag. My son left the doggy bag, and then she chased us into the parking lot to give us the doggy bag. So the irony behind that is the walk on the way to the car, I'm ranting to my son how terrible that experience just was. And of course, the poor thing chases us down and says, "Sir, you forgot your food."
Yeah.
I looked at Dean. Well, I looked at my son. I said, "Idiot," like dummy. And then I looked at her like, "Thank," and I felt terrible because I had just been, complaining about for the last 45 seconds. So anyway, we've survived sushi, and now we're going to look at alternative. Speaking of causation, I think maybe in that particular sushi case, I'm thinking lack of experience and expertise would be my causation theory. Would you have an alternative causation theory? And her, I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
My alternative causation maybe just doesn't pay attention, lack of detail, maybe
Lack
not.
of detail. I'm
Yeah.
so guilty of that. But let's talk about this. What we have learned. I mean, I don't like working on causation cases. I don't like it. There are some cases where I have another case right now where, I mean, we're screwed on liability. I mean, we screwed up and the whole thing's on videotape and we're just arguing causation. So in that case, you have no choice but to come out firing on alternative causation. But I think the key is when liabilities may be up in the air, right? I think the kind of the general habit is to not talk about alternative causation until down the road,
Hmm.
which may in some cases be too late. So when we've done podcast, I do speeches on this. When we talk about, construction of, opening statement, I say, in the first 15 to 30 seconds, you better put something else on trial, not your client. And I think in some of the recent projects we have seen, the defense attorneys have come out with the "we didn't do it" defense.
Right.
We did not screw this up, we promise, rather than jumping to alternative causation, because I think that's just kind of how people are wired. You tend to, well, hell, look at the verdict form, right?
You're right.
It starts with liability, then it goes to causation, then it goes to damages. And so I think that's how many cases get argued, but I don't think that's necessarily the most effective way to do it, correct?
No, and I think we've seen very recently is that jurors are looking for alternative causation. They're looking for
Yeah.
reasons. Just as humans, think about when anything happens,
Yeah.
in life, everybody always wants to figure out, well, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And the we don't know why it happened is usually never satisfying, right? People are
Yeah.
upset with that. So when you have a situation where you're pointing towards one cause and you have the other side going, well, it's the plaintiff's burden to prove that that's what it was. We don't really know what it was, but it's their burden to prove what it was. I just don't think that sits well with jurors.
And here's the thing, they're instructed by the judge that the plaintiff has the burden of proof on causation. And Steve, the jurors just don't care.
No.
Jurors, I mean, on our most recent one, right? We took votes on liability. Every single liability vote was a yes vote on causation with
Exactly.
no good reason. They just give it to them. And so I think, again, I think it's a case by case basis, but I think defense attorneys can attack, on alternative causation hard and at least plant that seed, give them something. Because here's the thing: if you don't, I mean, how many jurors are going to sit in the juror room saying, yeah, I don't think they met their burden of proof on causation.
Yeah,
I'm voting
that's
defense.
exactly.
They
They don't
don't
talk
do
like that,
that.
right?
You have to you have to give the jury weaponry, and the jury's going to use that weaponry in deliberations to say, it wasn't Professor Plum with the candlestick in the lobby. It was this. So I think that's something that attorneys are going to need to start doing more of in the future, particularly on the types of cases that we work on where you have high exposure, and the jury's going to want answers. And I'm just not sure when it comes to burden of proof that it's just not a really good argument, is it?
Yeah, no, I don't think that that's a great argument, because I think, as we see all the time, to your point about how the negligence and the causation votes lined up exactly, it's because people have a really hard time of identifying both if someone is negligent and then whether or not that negligence caused the actual injury. And without having that additional cause, it makes it easy for them to go A to B without any real hesitation or even really understanding of why they're going from A to B. But
Yeah.
as we know, if for example they were to say negligence but say no on causation, then they're not making it to damages. So it becomes extremely important to be able to give them the weaponry and give them the understanding so that they might say yes to one but no to the next one.
Yeah, and they don't like the way it's. Remember, the jurors were asking us like, now wait a second, I want to give like, remember it was like juror number 7. She's like, well, I think yeah, I vote yes on liability. I'm voting no on causation, but I still want to award money. And I'm like, well, you can't do that. She's like, well, that's okay. Well, then I'm giving you a yes on causation. It's like,
Right.
Jesus Christ. It's, oh God.
Well,
So
it's almost like you and I have talked about, right? Is they want to give them money. If they want to give them money, they work backwards to the
yeah,
negligence and causation, right? Rather than say, no, 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 you're not getting the damages that way. If they realize, wait a second, this means I can't give them money, well, then I'm going to work backwards. And yeah, I'm going to give you the information that you need in order to say yes on these, because I want to get to damages.
yeah. I tell you, the only way to win this battle, it has to start in voir dire. You have got to bring up these topics in voir dire, and I mean, create some real cognitive dissonance, because the times that I've seen it work effectively, particularly in the mock trial setting, is when you're watching the jurors deliberate, and one juror jumps from 1 to 3, and a different juror will say, no, you can't do that, right? And so to plant that seed in voir dire by explaining all this stuff well ahead of time, and then hitting it again and opening, and then really pounding it on closing, I think that's really the only shot that you got. But I think you start with that on voir dire and ask some pretty tough questions, like, okay, so if you see one of your fellow jurors in deliberations jumping from question 1 to question 3, are you going to hold them accountable? Are you going to hold them accountable to the judge's instructions? Those are the types of questions you have to ask. So if it does happen in deliberations, somebody's going to have cognitive dissonance and say, wait a second. Yeah, I'm not really comfortable with that. I mean, I'm on the right track here, right, Steve?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And we can think about, sometimes they become problematic jurors in the focus groups because they're always, you ask a question, and if you don't ask it perfect, they're like, no, wait a second, you
Yeah.
asked this or this, that, and the other. But actually, those are the type of jurors you want, right? Those are the
Yeah.
jurors that are going to hold both the plaintiff and the defense feet to the fire versus the ones that are just going to say, yeah, whatever, and just let you move on. So yeah, it absolutely becomes extremely important during voir dire to be
Yeah.
asking the type of questions that are going to elicit those "it depends" responses, or "I need more information," or "well, now that's not quite right." Like I said, they can be a pain in the butt when you're on the receiving end of it, but at the same time, those are the jurors you want to put on your side from a defense perspective, because they're going to see things more objectively, and they're going to be the ones to hold people accountable in the jury room.
Yeah, and this is a touchy subject, but I tell you what, it can work on the right case, and plaintiff attorneys don't like it. Sometimes, Steve, as a defendant, you got to admit liability. Are you aware of the headaches that because here's the thing, if you admit liability, a lot of that stuff never comes in. And then your question number 1 is causation, right?
Right.
They're not arguing about liability. There is no leapfrogging causation, but so many defendants are uncomfortable with that because they know they're going to pay something. But I still think that's why you mock try these cases. That's why you focus group these cases and see, like we do this test retest project where on day one you fight on liability, you fight on causation, see what happens with the damages. Day two, give them liability. You just take liability out of the equation, do causation. What if your damages go down by 50%?
Right. And you don't know
That's
if you
a
don't.
lot. Yeah.
Well, you
It's a lot
don't
of
know if
money.
you don't try, right?
You don't know if you don't try. So I think that's enough for alternative causation stuff. But I think those are the trickiest cases that I consult on. And I think without the absence of jury research in those cases is probably like Russian roulette at this point. So
I would say so. Yeah.
I think we have some viewer mail. I know
I
you
got
have a
some
little
viewer
bit.
mail. Yeah. Do you want me to
Yeah,
go first?
I got some too. Yeah, why don't you go first?
All right. So this one I think here is right up your alley. So I want to save my client money on witness training services. Can I run more than one witness through your training at a time? Or is there a time where I shouldn't?
Yeah, the answer to both of those is yes. So what we will do for both efficiency and cost savings is the phase one of our training program is mostly didactic and strategic. And you can do that in the group setting and do it highly effectively. That being said, you need individual follow-up sessions that really need to be just, the attorney, the consultant, the witness in the absence of other witnesses, because every witness is going to have unique issues. We don't want to create any performance anxiety in front of other witnesses. And most of all, we don't want to contaminate witness testimony by somebody watching somebody else in the preparation process. So absolutely, we can do that. In other words, if you had 6 witnesses, doesn't need to take 6 days. We could probably cut that to 4 days by rotating, doing our day one of didactic and then rotating people through individually. Answer is absolutely yes, and there's really no problem with that. And the one exception, the former employee, yeah, they're not going to be taking that. The former employee or the disgruntled former employee, they're not going to be part of that group setting. They shouldn't be part of that group setting. It's just not going to happen. That's a good example. The other example, for example, if it was a healthcare case, I would never mix doctors and nurses in the same room for that. No, I want my group of doctors here and I want my group of nurses here. Same thing in business litigation or product liability. I don't want a C-level executive sitting there with a middle manager in the same witness preps. I think you have to separate it so you have kind of like people. Because I think otherwise it creates some tension and maybe some stress that's unneeded. So I think those are some examples in which it would not be a good idea. You'd have to stratify your witnesses and then separate them in the groups.
That's all good. I think one other thing I'd add on to that as well is that highly emotional witness too. That, for example, we work with bus drivers, train operators, and a lot of others that if they have a lot of emotional stuff, right, they're not going to feel comfortable, nor would you want them to get that emotion out in another group of other people, because then
you're right.
potentially bring up things that they don't need to see. So I think, to your point is there's many times that you can do it in a group setting, but you also have to be smart about it so you can save money. But at the same time, you don't want to save money, have a group setting at the cost of hurting your case either.
Exactly. That's a really good question.
Yes.
All right. I got one for you here.
All right.
Everybody's been asked about this. Let's try that again. Does a juror's social media activity in any way predict outcome of verdict? This is a tricky one, because I was wondering, because here's the one thing I do know. I think that there's and I think we have some data. We could probably collect this more accurately. I'm not convinced. If you get 10 people, maybe 9 of them have social media accounts. I'm not sure all 9 are really active on them, and how much, I know people that are on Facebook every 30 minutes, much less every day. I've never had a Facebook account. I don't use Twitter. Then some people I think may have an account, and maybe it's just for family. They check it every couple of weeks. Is there any predictive utility particularly during jury selection, of people's social media activity?
I guess the biggest thing I would say as far as that goes is what's their activity look like, right? Is it like,
Yeah. Are
to
you
your point?
posting angry things a lot? That I would want to
Exactly.
know that.
Are you
Yeah.
posting pictures of your dog?
Yeah.
But are you posting pictures that are inflammatory, have a political
Yeah.
tinge to them, like you said, are angry, are talking about the some injustice that happened? So I think, it depends, and it might be one thing too where someone posts two things, but those two things are very, very
Yeah.
emotional, are highly,
Sure.
inflammatory, whereas someone else might post 100 things that are highly inflammatory. I mean, I think to each one, those are things that need to be taken in consideration. So I think not necessarily the number, but more or less the context with which they're being posted.
And also, that being said, there is the phenomenon. Again, this is why I don't put a lot of stock into social media posts, because you have what I call, particularly in the University of North Carolina sports message boards, I call them, see, in a bar, they're called beer muscles, right?
Right.
And online, they're called keyboard muscles. And, people can be really mean, really nasty, really angry with a keyboard. And then, you put them in a group of 11 other people, and they don't have that keyboard. They don't have that privacy. They don't have that shield to, like, they're going to actually have to defend themselves in the face of other people. So I don't think I'd necessarily advise a defense attorney to strike somebody that posts a lot of, angry, negative shit necessarily, because if they cannot articulate that at the group level, they're going to be followers. So I think that's why the importance of verbal, voir dire is so important, to test these people, see what their personality and communication styles are. So, for example, you have somebody, okay, we know they're posting a lot of bad stuff, and then during voir dire, they're loud, they're talkative, right? They maybe have a little leadership character. Okay, that's a dangerous freaking juror, Steve. Okay, but then you get the very same activity, and someone's more shy, they're mousy, milk toast. Why do they say milk toast?
I have no
What's wrong
idea.
with milk toast? I,
That's your
I don't
next.
know.
That's
I don't
your
know where
next.
that came from. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that juror is particularly dangerous for you. So I think it's a piece of information. I don't find it to be a predictive piece of information on its own. I think you'd have to combine it with some other personality and communication skills issues.
Oh, I think I agree with you 100%. And one of the things you said to me that was, I think, really touches it off the most is, are they a leader or are they a mousy? Because we get asked all the time,
Yeah.
right? I don't want that juror. They have all these different characteristics, and then we have to say, well, look at them though. No one's going to listen to them. They're going to get into the room and they might be ranting and raving and doing whatever, but they don't have the stature or the ability to command a room. People are just going to
Correct.
say, they're going to get the yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, and you're going to become that person that really the jurors are just going to ignore. And yeah, you might be, saying whatever you're going to say, but to your point is, if you're not a leader, I don't care how extreme your views are or how much you're going to be angry and stuff. If you can't command a room and no one cares what you say, then you're not a risk.
Yeah. All right. Is it my turn?
It's my turn, actually.
Oh, it's your turn. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to step on your toes there.
So next question. Have you been seeing higher damage awards post-COVID? Now, we get asked this all the time because there's an assumption that with COVID, people have become a lot more emotional and that. But what are you seeing as far as damage awards?
I have not seen higher damage awards, and remember the whole this. What drives me insane, absolutely insane, which is my next question to you, which you know where I'm going, is there's a lot of myths out there, myth here, myth there, and people just wildly guess on why things are happening a certain way. Okay, nuclear verdicts were alive and well before COVID. Okay, they were alive and well, and they're alive and well now. And I'm just telling you, during COVID, peri-COVID, and going, hopefully, cross our fingers, knock on wood, post-COVID, you and I have been studying this stuff. I haven't seen, I've know what I've seen. I've seen remarkable consistency. I really have not seen crazy stuff. Where I do see crazy stuff, which we did a podcast about, is when people get hammered at the airport and then get on a plane, and then some rude airline attendant yells at them about their mask, and then they get their teeth knocked. Like, that's where I'm seeing crazy stuff. We talked about the football and baseball games, guys that are too many Bud Lights, and they're arguing over the game, and they're hammering each other. This is very extreme behavior. You get a structured courtroom setting where there's rules. It's really, and again, you're the social psychologist. Again, it's a state dependent learning thing. I think it's, you've in a legal setting, or even a mock trial setting, the way we structure it, they get into that state and they behave and they think differently than they do at the ballpark. Isn't that true?
Oh, absolutely. The rules are a lot different, like you said, and
Yeah.
you have your bailiff, you have your judge, you have the more formal feeling of the courthouse versus the rowdy,
Yeah.
rough and of the football stadium where everybody's
Yeah.
pounding beers in the parking lot on the way to the stadium.
And
to
airplane
your-
bottles. They sneak in the airplane. So I was at the Duke Carolina game, which is like the worst experience of my life. And I went to the men's room at halftime, and the whole floor is just littered with airplane bottles.
Nice.
Wow.
You got to do like my old alma
that in
mater
college.
on Central Michigan. Remember I sent you that where
Yeah.
they caught somebody at the game with a styrofoam cup from the concession stand, and then had their pint of liquor that they were pouring into it right in the game.
At Wrigley Field, the best one at Wrigley Field is the suntan lotion bottle. That's not a sun. You can buy it online, and then you fill that, and then suntan lotion. You don't even have to.
Everybody's always finding ways, to your point of the
We're in the wrong business. We could have started a website on that after what I did in college. Oh, we could start just apparatus to sneak booze into stadiums. I mean,
sounds like a
paying
good business model.
$17 for a beer at a Dodgers games. That's a little. I think that's a little excessive. I think you're reinforcing that negative behavior by jacking that price up so much.
Very true.
Boy, we got really off track with that one.
We did, but that's all right. So I'm gonna get us back on track with the damages, because I agree with you. I mean, I've actually done some research on it, and I've written a little bit about it. Is that, before COVID hit, we saw, the nuclear verdicts like you were talking about. Once kind of we were in the throes of COVID, we looked at damages, and what we actually found is, you might have seen that the mean damages were a little bit higher, but the median damages were actually lower. And kind of the prevailing thought behind that is that people were saying, yeah, what happened to this plaintiff is bad, but right now we're all dealing with stuff. We've all been impacted negatively. So rather than having people be A, highly emotional, or B, overly sympathetic, what you actually saw was a little bit, I don't even call it less sympathy, just more of a not as willing to provide as much money because everybody was going through something. And I started to collect more data now after we've been, a few years out from COVID. And what I'm seeing is the numbers are going back up to where they were prior to COVID. So that dip we saw is over. So we're back to more of the pre-COVID numbers. So I would actually say now we're going to be back up, and nuclear verdicts have always been around, like to your point. But I would say that if anything, COVID didn't increase the damage awards, it actually decreased it. And now we're back to a more steady level that we were before COVID.
It's really amazing. And we've talked on this podcast, people are pissed, man. And you have a massive mental health problem in this country. And it just has not been translating into the deliberation room, which is quite astounding. But I do think it's the structure and the state dependent learning. So I think we need more time.
Right.
We need
absolutely.
Need more time to keep studying it. Okay, next question. This is a question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to answer it myself, and then you can comment. You know where I'm going. There's only one thing that makes me freaking pissed. Bill, dear Bill, why don't you think that social inflation causes nuclear damage? Everybody knows this is the case. Complete bullshit. There is not one iota of scientific evidence. What it actually is, it's the opposite. Okay. I'm not saying there's no such thing as social inflation, right? Get your insurance bill lately. Yeah. Okay. Can nuclear verdicts make things more expensive for society? Absolutely. I'm not saying that, but you got knuckleheads out there saying that social inflation causes nuclear verdicts, which makes no sense whatsoever. Number one, logically, right? Number two, there's zero proof, zero evidence, none of that stuff. And everybody, you know what, again, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but I get in trouble a lot. The insurance defense industry, oh, they love that excuse. Well, it's the jurors' fault. These crazy damn jurors are the ones causing it's the social inflation that's pissing the jury off, and then the jury's getting pissed off and tripling these awards. Steve, that's not true. Period. It's not true. There's no one can prove it's true. I've seen zero evidence. That is just, you know what it is? It's a very convenient excuse for people getting hit with nuclear damages and having nuclear settlements.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm gonna not take as much heat as you, hopefully, I'm gonna stay away from that. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is preparation, making sure your witnesses are trained, making sure you understand case facts, and a lot of that is going to help tamper these things down. And I think, that you've said it before on a LinkedIn post that you did, is you can't really have it both ways, meaning that you can't have social inflation drive up really large verdicts, but then now you're seeing a slew of several defense verdicts. Like I just sent you one today, right, where there was a defense verdict against a really high profile plaintiff attorney. So I guess you can't have social inflation one time, and not social inflation another.
What? Yeah. Did it disappear? So okay. So let me get this straight, Steve. When you get by the way, there's a lot of defense verdicts, but on those verdicts, social inflation just kind of evaporated, right? Like in the Shawshank Redemption. Where did he go? Oh, he evaporated like a fart in the wind. I mean, you can't have it on one case and then it just evaporates into the wind on the other. And it's a very illogical argument. We know why people get hit for nuclear verdicts. We've talked about it a million times. It's not the jurors' fault. It's not social inflation. Everybody needs to grow up.
Agreed. All right. Any other questions, Bill?
I'm out of questions, and you and I have a conference call in 15 minutes. So
yeah,
I
agreed.
think we wrap this one up. But yeah, back to the alternative causation, tricky stuff that needs to be tested, so you know where the limitations are. And you may want to admit liability, even though everybody's really uncomfortable, because if you test that and it decreases your damages, I mean, I think you have an ethical responsibility to the client. And everybody wants to fight. I get it, and you may not think you did anything wrong, but if you've got a loser, trust me, the plaintiff attorney doesn't like clients that admit liability because it takes away a lot of weaponry, takes away a lot of anger, because the conduct does not come in, right? The egregious, it doesn't come in really. If it does, it comes in at a superficial level, and then you're going right to causation. It takes away a lot of the weaponry that plaintiff attorneys really like. So I think that just needs to be assessed very carefully, and you can do that through the both focus group and mock trial methodology. Steve, take us out.
I think you summed that up perfectly. Another good podcast. Thanks for joining, Bill. If you need anything, as you always reach out to Bill at Kanasky, Kanasky at courtroomsciences.com or swood@courtroomsciences.com. You can always find our blogs, additional podcasts, a lot of writing up there that we have at courtroomsciences.com. This has been another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. We'll see you next time.
That's it.